Welcome to CSI Iowa. I'm your host, Bob Monserrat. Matt Monserrat's in the production booth. Glad you joined us tonight. Tonight, I have a guest that is the president of National Patent Analytical Systems. This is a company that manufactures, one of the things that it manufactures that we're going to talk about is evidential breath testing devices. And as you know, I've been working for the Iowa State Crime Laboratory for many years, 33 over that. And many of those years has been working in the breath alcohol section of the laboratory. And so that's something that really probably should talk about, since there are many, many drunk driving arrests out there, and many of those arrests are done on evidential breath testers. So tonight we're going to talk to John Fusco. John, are you there? And we're bringing John on via Skype. So welcome to the show, John.
Well, thank you. I'm glad to be here, Bob.
Yeah, well, we've known each other for quite a while, and I remember that when we pretty much met, you sold us actually some of the old Intoxilyzer 4011As. Do you remember that?
Well, I go back a long way in the industry. I started in 1975, actually, so I'm pushing, 40 years now or something like that in the business. And I've worked with Iowa virtually all those years. Yourself and of course your predecessor Cal Rayburn out there. It's been a very good relationship all these years.
Yeah. And we started, with the Intoxilyzer model 4011A, and that was back in 1976. And of course, it's an evidential breath testing device. And actually, from there, we had that instrument for 27 years in the state of Iowa, and then we moved into the Datamaster CDM, and then had that for 10, 11 years, and then now we moved into the newest one that your company makes, the Datamaster DMT. Now, you haven't always been in the breath testing area. You did something before that, right?
Well, yeah, actually, when I graduated college, I actually started out in a family dry cleaning business, oddly enough, which may sound a little strange, but that's, I guess, what I thought I was intended to do, but in life, and decided shortly after that I just really wasn't cut out for that, and I wanted to do other things. So I ended up getting into the uniform business, mostly safety uniforms, and then very quickly made the jump into some equipment, of which breath analyzers were a part of that. And that's basically, I stayed there as a service technician, sales agent, and in a lot of cases, instructor, up until about 1991, when the opportunity came up to purchase a product line, which was the BAC Datamaster at the time. And so we did. I put together a deal, and we bought the product line that I was representing, which was the Datamaster, and moved it to Ohio, and we've been manufacturing in Ohio ever since.
Yeah, did you, I guess I'm wondering, why did you, really get into the breath testing business? Is that something that you had an interest in, or, was it something that you were, pro law enforcement and you wanted to make a difference? Was it anything like that?
No, actually, it wasn't. Nothing quite that fancy. It was an opportunity I saw that I simply thought would be a very good one. It wasn't. Uniform business was highly competitive, and I always had sort of a bent for technology, even though I don't have a background in science. And it just proved itself to be very interesting. And I thought, this is something I'd like to do. The opportunity came up, so I took it and learned on the fly. And that's what I'm doing now.
Yeah. And the thing is, this is also a competitive business. I mean, there are other manufacturers of breath instruments, and obviously we meet once a year through the International Association of Chemical Testing, and then we have manufacturers there. So there's always, so you're still competing for, the business of, well, not only in the States, but internationally too, correct?
Yes, it is in many respects, it's a very highly competitive business, although the number of competitors are, because of the size of the marketplace, which is relatively small compared to most other markets. Because of the size of the marketplace, there aren't that many competitors, but it is still a highly competitive industry. What tends to set you apart are actually two things, I think. One is how well you can innovate, and the other is the quality of the science that you're employing in your product.
Yeah. Now you remember the indium crimper boxes, correct? Do you remember that?
Oh yes, I have one in my collection.
You use it as a boat anchor, or okay, you have it in your collection. That's right.
Yeah,
Okay.
I have a collection of a lot of different breath testing instruments that I picked up over the years in different places.
Well, so you've noticed how the technology has changed over the years, but you also know that it is one of the, and I hate to say it, but as far as the defense community, that's those instruments are constantly under attack, and you often go out to defend your own particular instrument.
Well, we do, and I think there's a number of reasons for this. The fact that it's under attack. First and foremost, the laws have become very strict. The price is very high that people pay for it, which tends to then generate some of these arrests in which the people charged are forced, for a lot of different reasons, to defend themselves by hiring a lawyer and and employing every defense they can, because the cost in terms of job, livelihood, not necessarily money, but certainly in terms of jobs and livelihood, is very, very high. So consequently, what has happened is there's a whole kind of a cottage industry that has sprung up in the defense community that is centered around drunk driving enforcement. And and also I think another reason why you find people, or a lot of attorneys that specialize in this area, is because the sciences employed is probably one of the most, if not the most, studied science in forensics. I mean, there's been more work done in the breath analysis field in terms of testing than you can imagine. It's very well defined. It's very well studied. It's very well documented. The data is very good. But the key in this too is that what you have to remember is that it's not the instruments that's being used that create the opportunity for the defense. If you go back and you look at this science, the whole science in breath analysis is centered around breath to blood analysis, which essentially, even by the admission of the people that did these studies going back into the 40s and 50s, this is an estimate, and that's all it was ever intended to be, was an estimate. The fact that it's been put into law in terms of per se legislation is the choice of the legislatures. So in a way, the legislatures themselves have created, both the business and the industry by opting for laws that, and certainly do, promote, of course, better road safety. Obviously, the more we can control drinking and driving, the better off we are.
Yeah, the other thing to consider too is that since there are so many arrests, and do you know what the average is across the country as far as per state? Is it like 30,000 OWI arrests?
It's something on that order. Yes, it's quite high.
Yeah, per state, and so like you were saying, there are people that are drivers. I mean, they drive commercial vehicles, or they have jobs where they need to drive, and if they lose their license, then it's going to hurt their ability to work, and so therefore they're more likely to go find an attorney, and for the attorney, it's like a gold mine, is how I see it.
Well, it is. I mean, I think I've always tried to, as you know, we make, as a manufacturer, I make, and my people make every effort to work with the defense community, as opposed to, for lack of a better term, stonewalling them, simply because we try to build a credible relationship with the defense community. And we've always felt in our best interest that the worst nightmare that we can have is a defense attorney that doesn't know what he's doing. Because
not only does he not know what he's doing, but then he can convince a judge that he's right. Wouldn't you say?
That does, in fact, at times happen. But more often, I think now what happens is he ends up wasting a lot of people's time and not doing his client any good. I think that's probably more frequent than even the other way on it.
Well, and the other option, or the other thing that could happen within a state, is if you have something that goes up to a Supreme Court and the court rules against you or your breath testing instrument for some reason, then that can change your whole system.
Oh, sure. Then you start over.
And then you start over, and at a huge expense and a lot of training that would have to take place. So I think part of your responsibility as a manufacturer is to be available, and you are, for those that may need you on certain challenges that come up across the country where your instruments are used.
We absolutely do, and we see that the customers are supported in this thing, and part of that support, again, is being available to the defense to give them guidance, so that they don't go doing things that just waste a whole lot of everyone's time. We think this has been almost as beneficial as working with the customers. For instance, when the defense calls us, he asks us a question, we give them a straight answer, and a lot of times the conversation will end like, well, if you drag me into court on this thing, here's what my testimony is going to be. And that's all you hear of it. They go away, they find another argument, or they plead them out. And this is the way this is really the way I think the system should be working on that. Yeah. I will say this: over all these years, it has given us very, very, very few problems, and I think it's helped everyone enormously from our perspective, anyway.
Right, but there are other manufacturers that have had problems over the years that have been dealing with them over the years and having problems with that, and we're all aware of that. But the fact that with their breath testing is out there, and it has been out there for years, and the technology over the years, and we've both experienced technology changes like that have been unbelievable and have made the job for us, easier, because you've taken care of a lot of the controversial issues that have been brought up in court. I mean, not that they were true. It's just that you have to deal with an issue brought up technologically, if you know what I'm saying.
No, there's no question about it. You do.
Yeah.
The technology has evolved. Of course, the two major parts of the evolution, it went from wet chemistry to infrared technology for the most part, a little fuel cell, but mostly infrared. And then it went from basically a manually operated device to a device that's controlled by microprocessor, or in other words, computer driven. And I think, these two things have really tended to solidify the instruments in such a way that it becomes very difficult for the defense community to mount a real good attack on it. It's just very hard for them. And what you find is a lot of defense people that really start to specialize very much in this area, including the technology, simply to try to spot any opportunities that are there.
Well, there are many people that's how they make their living as far as the attorneys go. And I'm not trying to put them down in any way. It's just that there's so many arrests throughout the country that they have a lifetime job if they want to stick with it. And when they do that, they become quite good in the work that they do, defending people. And so they're going to look for every opportunity to look for mistakes along the way that maybe the officer makes, or, in conducting a test, or if the instrument, well, you know what I'm saying, if there is an error message, which is a term that we don't like to use, because it really isn't errors. It's just something that the instrument noticed and is telling you about, correct?
In a lot of cases, this is absolutely true. And yeah, I mean, your assessment of the defense community is true. Over the years, I have gained a lot of respect for these guys. They can be very tenacious. They are certainly their client's advocate. But, this is our system. This is the way they need to be. And it is our system. And, you may not like it. You may not agree with it, but you got to respect it. So, that's pretty much my feeling on it.
Yeah, no, and I know, and you've been all over the country, I know, because you've been called in to defend your instrument, and just like any other manufacturer, they're called in to defend their instruments too. But like I said, as far as the technology goes, and you put on training for those that, work with the instrument, to repair the instrument, that's us, or the people that you sell your instrument to, and like you said, you have training for those attorneys. And the more knowledge that they have, the better it is for us and for everybody concerned, because then it would help to hold down on these court cases, as much as possible. But on the other hand, that they're always looking for another hook, because if they don't have hooks, then they don't get they don't get a reputation for winning cases.
And this is, the training can sometimes be a double-edged sword in a way. Yes, we do train the defense community. We offer it as a familiarization. We don't offer, certainly don't offer the maintenance training to them, simply because it's just not a good idea to get familiar, to have people familiar with the maintenance and saying, oh, I'm a maintenance technician on this, with virtually no experience. They have a tendency to want to puff up their credentials a little bit. We do try to avoid this. But yes, we make it very clear to the defense community that this is a familiarization course. It's designed to acquaint you with not only the instrument and the technology, but it's designed to acquaint you with the physiology also, because it's surprising how many of these attorneys are really completely unskilled in the area of the physiology of what it really means to be drunk. So we try to open eyes that way too.
All right. Now, I'd like to get into, and we need to take a break, but I want to get into other aspects of, infrared technology, how the instrument works in general, the physiology of why we use breath testing. And so I think there's a lot we need to, go over so that we can, learn about what it's all about. So we'll be back. We're talking to John Fusco, who is president of National Patent Analytical Systems, which is a manufacturer of evidential breath testing instrument. And you've been watching CSI Iowa on webcast1live.com. So we'll be back in a minute.
From the RE/MAX Real Estate Concept Studios, this is Webcast One Live.
At the BrownellsPoliceStore.com, we specialize in a full line of duty gear for military, law enforcement, and security professionals. PoliceStore.com has a great selection of high-quality and dependable police supplies, all backed by Brownell's 100% unconditional lifetime guarantee. The Brownells Training Group offers firearms training for military, police, professional security, and qualified citizens taught by professionals who are recognized for their knowledge and real experience. Check us out today at PoliceStore.com/CSI.
Whether you're 10, 25, 50, 80 years old and beyond, everyone needs to live within their means. I'm Tom Coates with Consumer Credit of America. For almost a quarter of a century, we've helped people of all ages learn to manage their personal finances to benefit them far into the future. When problems arise, we've got the experience you need to make those debt problems go away. Got financial problems? Call Consumer Credit of America.
From the RE/MAX Real Estate Concept Studios. Listen, watch, chat. This is Webcast One Live. Programs on webcast1live.com are brought to you in part by KDC Builders, building custom homes for how you live. KDC will take your dreams and turn them into reality. Go to our website, kdcbuilt.com, or call Hannah Inman at 515-975-9990. And Tom Coates and ConsumerCreditOfAmerica.com. Are you overwhelmed with mounted credit card debt and feel there's no way out? Well, there is. Call 1-800-955-5765 for Consumer Credit of America. That's ccofamerica.com.
Welcome back to CSI Iowa on webcast1live.com. Talking to John Rusco from National Patent Analytical Systems, and we're talking about evidential breath testing devices. And John, we were talking about a lot of aspects of how we defend it, what it does. I'd like to get into the technology of it. I know that from when I started back in probably '82 is when I got into the breath area. We were using infrared at that time. That was the old Intoxilyzer, which actually is such an antique when you think about it now. But it was using infrared technology to detect alcohol. And you were here, obviously, when that technology was available. Why is infrared technology still the standard today?
Well, it is still, without a doubt, the most stable. It is the least. Well, of course, breath testing is the least invasive, as opposed to something like drawing blood. This you don't want to be doing, obviously. It's very fast, and it's a real-time test. It's extremely versatile, also in terms of its ability to be very specific for alcohol and not respond to other compounds that may be in the breath or the air or something like this.
What makes it specific? Because we're looking at different wavelengths. Infrared has different wavelengths, and alcohol, has a specific wavelength where it absorbs. Has that been improved on in any way?
It's been, I like to use the term tweaked a lot. The older instruments, if you go back into the days of the Intoxilyzer 4011, the reason why infrared absorption works is because the molecule of alcohol will respond to or absorb infrared energy at specific wavelengths. And the wavelengths that of infrared that are employed typically in alcohol is typically about 3.4 microns, or there's other areas. There's one up around 6, and there's another area up around 9.5 microns. So the technology, when you employ this technology, you need a way of separating all the other wavelengths of infrared energy that are going to be present when you're using infrared. You need a way to allow only the frequency that is being absorbed by the alcohol or ethanol to strike the detector. Now, this is one area that really has come along quite a ways over the years. In the older instruments, and even some of the newer instruments, actually, there's a phenomenon in infrared filters is called frequency bandpass, which is the tolerance as to how narrow a slice you can take out of this infrared frequency spectrum. In the case of the Data Master, we've always used a very, very narrow slice, down to around 50 nanometers or so. But in the older instruments, this slice of energy they took was actually more like 400 and 500 nanometers. Now the difference is that once you start taking a wider perspective or a wider sample of the infrared energy, you're opening yourselves up to other compounds that could, if present, start to show up and maybe influence that reading.
What would those be, for instance?
If the person's supposedly, and there's a lot more in terms of toxicology that goes into this, but let's just grab the most common example that the defense likes to use. If their client was, say, a diabetic, and in a state of ketosis, that means that the body is producing acetone as a result of the reaction of the sugars, and not only that, there's more recent research that indicates the acetone itself can metabolize into, I believe, isopropanol in some cases, and so both acetone and isopropanol can be read at the same frequency, 3.4 microns, that alcohol would be read. So theoretically, if you had a diabetic who was in a state of ketosis, of course, you always can raise the question: is if your client was a diabetic, why in the world is he out there drinking? You know, this is not a good thing to be doing health-wise, but
right.
That question doesn't get raised. So, you know, supposedly, if the acetone or the isopropanol was present, then you know, this could influence the alcohol reading that the instrument is giving. And there have been a few documented cases out there where this has actually been observed in real life, and case studies presented on this.
And I'm assuming it's a rare event.
It's very rare. There's only a couple of really documented cases where this is actually turned up. But they publish a paper, and of course then the paper shows up in court, and all of a sudden this becomes somewhat akin to an epidemic, when you may be talking about 1 out of 1 million or something on this order. So how do you deal with it as a manufacturer? Well, as a manufacturer, we've dealt with it over the years by employing 2 and even 3 optical filters. And the theory here, and it works in real life also, is that if you look at several, at least 2, different wavelengths of infrared energy that are fairly close to each other, the absorption pattern for any chemical is not going to be identical at both of those wavelengths. So you can train the instrument itself, and this is done during the calibration process, to recognize what the filter values, the optical filter values, look like if only pure ethanol is in the sample. Then what you do is you establish a ratio between the 2 filters. In other words, one filter might read, let's just pull a number out of our hat here, might read an 80 in a pure ethanol environment, and the other filter might read a 100. So you always then expect a 1 to 0.8 ratio between the 2 filters. That way, if some other chemical is present and it affects either filter in a disproportionate way, that ratio is disturbed. And we can sense the fact that we do not have a correct ratio between those 2 filters, and we can then terminate the test and flag it as an interfering or a potentially interfering substance.
And then if that happens, then it's up to the officer then to take take a different test, or take a blood or urine or whatever.
Well, that's a matter of that would be a matter of state procedures, but our recommendation is that the test be repeated, and if the same situation arises again in terms of interfering compound, yes, that they possibly have that person looked at or treated or medically watched, certainly.
Right. Now so you've narrowed it down, and the instrument looks for interfering substances if present on a person's breath. And again, that's something that doesn't happen that often either. But isn't it also something, as far as a detector that's used, a fuel cell? Isn't that something that you also incorporate in some, if it's requested, in some of your instruments?
Yes, we're still developing on the fuel cell. We have not really used fuel cells all that long. We do offer it. We're still on the learning curve on fuel cells. It's an addition. The theory behind the fuel cell, or not behind the fuel cell, but the theory behind employing a fuel cell along with an infrared instrument is that we're doing an analysis using two completely independent technologies. And this, to scientific type people, laboratory type people, this is a nice way of analyzing things. If you come up with the same result using two different technologies, that's better than coming up with a single result using a single technology. And the theory behind the fuel cell itself, and this came out of the NASA space age back in the 60s. The fuel cell itself simply is it's a platinum-coated substrate that when alcohol is deposited on it, it generates an electrical charge, and that electrical charge is in direct proportion to the amount of alcohol that comes in contact with the fuel cell. So you can, you can therefore measure alcohol or ethanol with the fuel cell. The drawback, and there's drawbacks to every technology, obviously, is that the fuel cell cannot differentiate easily the different kinds of alcohol. So it doesn't really know whether it's looking at ethanol or it's looking at isopropanol or it's looking at methanol or any of these things. So that's the idea behind the fuel cell.
Right, and that's why I think that infrared's been around for years and has proven itself to be pretty reliable. And you've only, as you said, tweaked it to make it even better than what it used to be years ago. And
that's very true.
Yeah. We need to take another break. And when we come back, I'd like to talk more about even the physiology of, where does the alcohol come from that gets into this device for it to measure. So when we get back, we'll talk a little bit about physiology of it. And you've been, our guest tonight is John Rusco from National Patent Analytical Systems. And you've been watching CSI Iowa on webcast1live.com. We'll be back after these messages.
From the RE/MAX Real Estate Concept Studios, this is Webcast One Live.
At the BrownellsPoliceStore.com, we specialize in a full line of duty gear for military, law enforcement, and security professionals. PoliceStore.com has a great selection of high-quality and dependable police supplies, all backed by Brownell's 100% unconditional lifetime guarantee. The Brownells Training Group offers firearms training for military, police, professional security, and qualified citizens taught by professionals who are recognized for their knowledge and real experience. Check us out today at PoliceStore.com/CSI.
Whether you're 10, 25, 50, 80 years old and beyond, everyone needs to live within their means. I'm Tom Coates with Consumer Credit of America. For almost a quarter of a century, we've helped people of all ages learn to manage their personal finances to benefit them far into the future. When problems arise, we've got the experience you need to make those debt problems go away. Got financial problems? Call Consumer Credit of America.
From the RE/MAX Real Estate Concept Studios. Listen, watch, chat. This is Webcast One Live. Programs on webcast1live.com are brought to you in part by KDC Builders, building custom homes for how you live. KDC will take your dreams and turn them into reality. Go to our website, kdcbuilt.com, or call Hannah Inman at 515-975-9990. And Tom Coates and ConsumerCreditOfAmerica.com. Are you overwhelmed with mounted credit card debt and feel there's no way out? Well, there is. Call 1-800-955-5765 for Consumer Credit of America. That's ccofamerica.com.
Welcome back to CSI Iowa. My guest tonight is John Rusco from National Patent Analytical Systems. We're talking about evidential breath testing. And John, we were talking about, the infrared technology, fuel cell technology, but for my viewing audience, how, when a person they're delivering their breath into the instrument, where is this alcohol coming from, and what is some of the physiology of the alcohol in the body?
Well, that's worth a couple hours by itself, but we'll see if we can. We'll see if maybe we can condense it a little bit here. The whole science of breath alcohol testing. I think Moron here has decided he's going to.
And that's your cat.
Yeah, that's the cat, Moron. The whole theory of breath testing is based around the science that for every molecule of alcohol that's in the breath, and specifically here we're talking about the deep lung air, or what they refer to as end expiratory air. For every single molecule that's there, on average, there's going to be approximately 2,300 or 2,350 molecules that are going to be present in the blood. Now, this is repeatable in scientific experiment after scientific experiment, and this is what I was saying earlier about this being one of the most documented areas of forensics in terms of scientific studies. So when in the early 60s, when the scientists were working with the government in terms of controlling alcohol, controlling, coming up with limits that can be tested for when people are being tested for drunk driving. They obviously couldn't use this 2350 because that's an average. And if you use that and you tried to establish a level of, say, a 0.08, which is what the current levels are, then if it's an average, then roughly half the people are going to be understated in their breath alcohol reading. The other half's going to be overstated. So in order to achieve a point at which they call scientific certainty, they established the level of 2,100, a ratio of 2,100 molecules in the blood for every single molecule that's in the breath. And this has become, I guess, affectionately known as the 2,100 to 1 ratio, which is pretty much what breath testing in the U.S. is based on. Foreign countries treat this a little differently in some respects, but in the U.S., it's primarily all based around this ratio. And if you look at the numbers on this, by using the 2,100 to 1 ratio, that what you have done is you have put the point at which a person would be called a 0.08 as at the lower level. so that 95% of the population, if they test a 0.08, is going to be either a 0.08 or higher. The other 5% is actually going to be overstated, very slightly, but they're going to be overstated, possibly by as much as 5 to 10%. And this has become very well established in the laws in every state in the country, and of course, with the federal government pushing it as they do, it's become a fact of life that we deal with every day. So virtually all breath testing instruments in the U.S. now are calibrated around this ratio.
So you're actually underestimating the breath test.
On average, the breath test underestimates the blood by about 10 or 12%. However, what has happened over the years is that the legislatures have decided that we don't really need to extrapolate this back to a blood reading. The legislatures now have said, well, you can have either a breath or a blood reading of a 0.08 and you're drunk. So breath essentially stands on its own anymore.
No correlation, correct. No correlation back to blood.
That's no correlation. That's now in the law, which has simplified things in courts a lot.
Yeah. But, I know a lot of times if you're in court, the defense likes to say, well, how much alcohol is actually coming out of your breath? I mean, can you, if you put it on a pinhead and painted it red, would you be able to see it? You've heard those kind of things, correct?
I've probably heard about almost as much as you have. Maybe not quite as much. Yeah, it's not a whole lot of alcohol, obviously.
Right, and then the alcohol, of course, when a person drinks it, which is normally the way people get it into their system, then when it's in the blood, how's it get into the breath?
Well, it gets into the breath through the arteries that transfer the oxygen from the lungs. There's an exchange that takes place through the in the deep lung, which is alveolar area, and oxygen is taken into the blood, and at the same time, the alcohol molecule is so small that it will actually pass through the other direction into the breath, and it will be expelled through the breath. Now, very little in terms of the alcohol that's in the body is actually expelled through the breath. Most of it is metabolized, and it's expelled in other ways, either perspiration or urine or something on that order.
Right. So the thing is that you're getting a very tiny amount that's pure alcohol coming out of your lungs, then getting into the instrument.
That's very true. The instruments are very sensitive from that standpoint, and they can't really read all that high in terms of the quantity of alcohol. Our instrument can read up to a 0.6, and that's really a limitation of the electronics. But at a 0.6, there have been very few recorded instances in history where people have actually achieved that breath alcohol level.
And still be breathing.
And still be breathing. You're right. Generally, a 0.4 is considered extremely serious, and even a 0.3 or lower. In the case of a novice drinker, even a blood or a blood alcohol level of 0.3 or 0.25 can even be extremely serious and possibly fatal.
Yeah. What's the highest that you have been told or heard of as far as a breath test level?
The highest that I've been told, it comes out of Missouri, and that was supposedly a 0.10 or a 0.1. I'm sorry, a 1
point.
A 1.0.
A 1.0, and the person was still alive.
Right. The highest that I know of personally was actually a 0.51, and that the breath test recorded a 0.480. But this has been many years ago, and that was on the Intoxilyzer 4011. That's as high as it would read.
I remember that. I mean, I remember it only reading that high. Yes.
That's right. It would. So the police They actually called me when they had this. It was funny. Uh, this is maybe 77 or 78. This is actually in Strongsville, Ohio. The officer called me and he said, "Hey, I think our instrument's broken." I said, "Well, what makes you say that?" He says, "Well, we got a guy sitting here that he just blew a .480." I said, that's as high as the instrument goes. What's he look like? And he said, "Well, he's just sitting here with his head down." I said, "You better call EMS and get him to the hospital."
Yeah.
Turned out his blood test was a .51.
And he survived.
He survived, but this was a well preserved individual.
Very experienced.
This was like his 5th or 6th DUI, and he was somebody's problem child, definitely.
Yeah, and so I know that you don't want to break those kind of records, because when you think about the impact on people that are dying out there because of the drunk drivers, and that's part of the reason why you do what you do. It's a public safety thing out there, and I think part of the things that frustrate us in a sense is, and this is something I wanted to ask you about, are the defense experts that we deal with. And even you deal with, because you're called in when there is a defense expert there that is trying to convince a jury that the instrument is not functioning right, or whatever the situation is. So you deal with that all the time. Is that correct?
Yes, it is. But over the years, I've really taken a very pragmatic view of this. And I guess what I'd have to say is, we all have to do our job. And my job is to make the best instrument I can and then defend it. The lab people's job is to implement the program, see that the procedures are followed, but the most important job that's out there that is done routinely, regardless of what happens with me and what happens with the lab guy, is that the cop is out there on the beat, and he does the most important thing, and that's getting this character off the street. Once that person is off the street, it's somebody else's problem, okay? And eventually these things wind up in the court. And to my way of thinking, the way that it goes into the court or goes in the court is yes, it's important. Yes, it's meaningful in terms of what's going to happen with this character on down the road. Is he going to get help? Is he going to do it again? But that actually pales in comparison to the fact that he's not on the road and he's not hurting anybody. And the cop is the guy that's responsible for that. Right.
I know people also make a living, as defense experts about the instrument. But I think on the other hand, there are some out there that really are not reflecting, the truth about the instrument. And I'm assuming you have found that to be true too.
Very true. We keep more or less records on defense people, particularly as they pertain to their testimony regarding our equipment, and even more particularly if they've been to one of our familiarization sessions, okay? Because we have had occasion where these people go out and they'll try to pawn themselves off as an expert, which we tell them they're not, at least not on our instrument. And then start making statements that are just patently either very misleading or just patently untrue. And if they do that, then what we do is we ask for a copy of the testimony. We get the testimony, and in a very, very factual fashion, I simply start pointing out all their errors, every one of them. And then they get a registered letter. The prosecutors get a registered letter. And the next time they go on the stand, they're presented with the letter. And they're usually not too happy about that. So it tends to keep them on a little more honest at times. Although an awful lot of defense people, particularly the experts, like to zero in on arguments that are very difficult to defend either direction. These are very remote arguments like GERDs, which is gastroesophageal reflux disease.
Yeah, the disease.
Where you just don't have the data out there to prove it either way. Now, there is some data. It's certainly in favor of the prosecution. It's in favor of the state. But there's no definitive data out there. And there's other areas that the defense like to pick on like that too. And if they can get the right audience in the jury, then, it can be a flip of a coin, and that's what they're going to try.
Right. And the other thing about not only your breath instrument, but any breath instrument that's evidential, it has to go through a testing process by the federal government, or I should say the National Highway Traffic Safety Administration. And you're required, if you want to sell your instrument, to be on that approved products list, correct?
Yes, absolutely. The Department of Transportation, NHTSA has a testing facility set up. And basically, the bottom line is that if Iowa wanted to buy our instrument, and this is just a theoretical, for instance, Iowa, unless you're required by state code, doesn't really have to have a Department of Transportation approved instrument. But if it's not approved by the Department of Transportation, they can't use federal dollars to buy it with, and that's the name of the game with the federal government. If it's not DOT approved, then fine, you can go out and sell it. Just don't use federal dollars to buy it with.
Right, and there are also international standards, true, also that you try to meet with these instruments, correct?
There are, and these are they're somewhat different than the DOT standards, because the attitudes of, I think, of some of the scientists involved were different than the attitudes of our own Department of Transportation people. The standards are good. I mean, there's certainly no problems with them. However, they are written in such a way so that virtually all evidential instruments will pass them. So they're not as strict as they really could be.
Mm-hmm. Right. But see, that's the pressure that you have also, that you have to meet these certain requirements. And I think it's important to do that. And I think it's good when we can say in a court of law that this instrument has been approved by DOT, National Highway Traffic Safety Administration, and so forth. And that, carries some weight for the person sitting on a jury that, hey, this is one that the government approves of.
It does. And of course, that's always brought up. That's one of the first things that, that the defense looks at. Well, is this DOT approved? Of course, this is usually a defense attorney that's not well experienced. But that's going to be one of the first things they ask, and they're going to want to see the testing. And a lot of this are really exercises in futility, and he knows that, but it's called doing diligence, and they do it. So, so we comply religiously, and it all works out in the end.
Right. And if you were to say, you've been doing this for a long time, many years, and you've been successful, in this business of providing breath testing equipment, and is there a future that you see? I mean, do you see anything down the road that's going to change as far as breath testing? Is it going to go another route? Is it going to go to saliva or vapors from the eye? Or do you see anything in the future that you can think of?
I certainly don't see anything in the way of changing the basic technology of breath testing in the near future. It's hard to look out like 10 years or so, but the history that the current technology of breath testing has is so long and so well established that I think it's going to take an awful lot to want to change that. The test itself is it's so fast, it's so non-invasive, it's simple, it's highly accurate, it's highly precise, and it's going to be hard to find something that is better.
Okay, and you've been around long enough to probably that you're always looking for the next thing. I know that because that's part of what you do. Is if there's something out there that's going to be there, you're going to be trying to develop that.
Absolutely. We have over the years, we've looked at saliva, we've looked at perspiration, because anywhere there's water in the body, there's going to be a proportionate amount of alcohol. So it's theoretically it's possible to test tears. You can test sweat, you can test saliva, you can test urine. There's a lot of things that you can test, and nothing at this point is as simple, fast and accurate as breath testing.
Mm-hmm. Right. Okay. Well, hey, John, we're at the end of our show. Believe it or not, it kind of goes fast as we proceed, and I know there's a whole lot we really haven't talked about, but at least you've given us an idea of what breath testing is about, and how accurate and reliable that it has been over all of these years. Even though people make fuss over it, it's still a very proven technology that is going to be there for a while. So thanks for being on the show, and appreciate you coming to us from Ohio. Actually, is where you're located, and I didn't mention that, but that's where your company is. And so we'll just have to see where we go from here. And if I have another question, I'll be sure to call you up and Skype you again. So thanks for being on the show.
Not a problem, Bob. I thank you for the opportunity, and have a good evening.
All righty. You've been watching CSI Iowa on webcast1live.com. And don't forget that you can watch these shows on my Facebook page, which is simply CSI Iowa. Just type that in the search bar, and it'll take you right to all these shows. So thanks for being with us, and we will see you next week. Bye-bye.
From the RE/MAX Real Estate Concept Studios, this is Webcast One Live.
At the BrownellsPoliceStore.com, we specialize in a full line of duty gear for military, law enforcement, and security professionals. PoliceStore.com has a great selection of high-quality and dependable police supplies, all backed by Brownell's 100% unconditional lifetime guarantee. The Brownells Training Group offers firearms training for military, police, professional security, and qualified citizens taught by professionals who are recognized for their knowledge and real experience. Check us out today at PoliceStore.com/CSI.
Whether you're 10, 25, 50, 80 years old and beyond, everyone needs to live within their means. I'm Tom Coates with Consumer Credit of America. For almost a quarter of a century, we've helped people of all ages learn to manage their personal finances to benefit them far into the future. When problems arise, we've got the experience you need to make those debt problems go away. Got financial problems? Call Consumer Credit of America.
From the RE/MAX Real Estate Concept Studios, listen, watch, chat. This is Webcast One Live. Programs on webcast1live.com are brought to you in